My issue that I had men in my life, but never for marriage. And I knew that.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
So you'd be seeing them or dating them, but you were like,
or I
okay.
date them, or...
When fictionalized Goldie Hawn hits 79 and finally gets tired of playing nice, she stops protecting Hollywood egos and decides to talk. Out of nowhere, she sits down, smiles like she's about to share a sweet memory, and instead drops a list of actors she claims were the most toxic men of Hollywood's golden age. No hints, no warm-up, just instant chaos. And once she starts telling the stories behind those names, the old Hollywood shine evaporates fast. Strap in, because by the end of this imagined video, some so-called legends aren't looking so legendary. But before we dive into the names, it helps to understand who this fictional Goldie was before all the drama began. Before the drama, before she was calling out Hollywood egos with a wink and a smile, Goldie Hawn was just Goldie. A wide-eyed girl from Washington, D.C., with big dreams, bigger energy, and zero idea that she'd become one of the defining faces of 70s and 80s cinema. She grew up in a middle-class Jewish household, the youngest of 3 children. Her mother, Laura Hawn, ran a dance school out of the family home, turning the living room into a mini studio where Goldie and her siblings twirled, leaped, and practiced routines long before they could spell audition. Her father, Edward Rutledge Hawn, played in a band on weekends, filling the house with music that rang from the piano in the living room to the drums in the basement. Basically, Goldie was raised on rhythm, stage lights, and the sweet buzz of applause, even if it was just family clapping after a botched pirouette. Goldie's first memories were full of dance shoes, mirrors, and music. Ballet became her first language. She absorbed the discipline, the routines, the perfectionist mindset early on. By age 10, she was already teaching younger kids, a mini teacher in a tiny studio, earning pocket money while honing her craft. And while most kids were figuring out their homework schedule, Goldie was perfecting her pliés and jetés, learning that precision, performance, and timing were everything. Despite this, acting wasn't her plan. She didn't grow up with a vision board labeled Hollywood starlet. She wanted to perform, yes, but dance was her love, her skill, her confidence. She adored being on stage, making people smile, feeling the thrill of live applause. Acting was something that came later, almost by accident. When the 60s hit and the entertainment world started experimenting with television, variety shows, and new formats for performance. Her first gigs were humble but formative. She worked as a go-go dancer in clubs, moving to the beat of rock and roll bands and learning how to command a crowd, even one that was mostly more interested in the drinks than the moves. Then came a small role on Good Morning World, a sitcom that didn't make her a household name, but taught her how to handle cameras, lines, and the chaos of production schedules. She wasn't the star, but she learned the machinery of show business. Everything changed when Rowan and Martin's Laugh-In came calling. This was her big break, the moment where the world said, "Okay, Goldie Hawn, we see you." Suddenly, she wasn't just another dancer or extra. She was a recurring presence, a bright, chaotic energy who could light up a scene with a giggle, a shimmy, or a perfectly timed eyebrow raise. The audience loved the dizzy blonde act, but Goldie, with her intelligence and timing, knew she was more than that. She played it up, leaned into it, and learned how to manipulate the public's perception while quietly keeping her instincts sharp behind the scenes. By her early 20s, Goldie had transitioned into film. Cactus Flower won her an Oscar, solidifying her as a bankable star with a sparkling public persona. Directors, producers, and co-stars began to treat her differently, both as someone to protect and someone to manipulate. The sweet, innocent, sparkly blonde act was both her armor and the source of professional misperceptions. People underestimated her intelligence, her intuition, and her ability to navigate the treacherous waters of Hollywood. This combination of early discipline, public charm, and behind-the-scenes savvy is what made Goldie resilient. She knew how to entertain, yes, but she also knew when to observe, when to step back, and when to say no. And trust me, in Hollywood, that no would come to cost her in ways she couldn't have predicted, starting with one very powerful man. Warren Beatty, the slow-motion sabotage wrapped in a smile. Goldie says her story with Warren Beatty wasn't some explosive Hollywood showdown. Nobody threw drinks, nobody screamed across sound stages, and nobody leaked anything to the papers. No, this one was slow, sneaky, and the kind of toxic you only notice once the damage is already done. According to her, the whole thing really started in the late 70s, right about the time Warren decided she was supposed to be his next romantic conquest, and she very politely said, absolutely not. Back then, Warren was basically Hollywood's unofficial mayor. If he wanted a script greenlit, it moved. If he wanted someone cast, they didn't even audition. If he liked you, life was sweet. If he didn't, well, you suddenly found yourself wondering why your phone wasn't ringing anymore. And Goldie? She didn't want the mess that came with Warren Beatty's love life, which was less of a dating history and more of a fire hazard. They had worked together years earlier on Dollar in 1971, then again in Shampoo in 1975, where the chemistry was cute on camera, but behind the scenes? Goldie said Warren always came with this heavy, intense energy. He had this way of making you feel like you were the only person in the room and the most replaceable person in the world at the same time. A talent, honestly. So when Warren started pursuing her, Goldie didn't play along. No flirting, no giggling, no accidentally running into him on set. She kept things professional, and she thought that was the end of it. But apparently, Warren didn't love rejection, especially not from someone who wasn't intimidated by him. Goldie said it started small. A script she'd been sent disappeared from circulation. No explanation. Then a producer she'd been working with suddenly couldn't make the meeting. Then another. Then suddenly that same producer didn't know if the project was still happening at all. Meetings she had been promised were rescheduled, then pushed, then forgotten. You know those things that don't feel like sabotage at first? More like bad luck or Hollywood being Hollywood? That's exactly how she described it. It was subtle, quiet, calculated. And because Warren never raised his voice or told her she'd made an enemy, it took a while for her to realize what was actually going on. Goldie said one of the turning points happened when she was talking to a director about a role she was excited for. He mentioned that he wasn't sure she was still the studio's preferred choice. Goldie asked why. He shrugged. There was feedback. And when she pushed, he clammed up so fast you'd think she asked for the nuclear codes. But he did slip up on one thing. He said Warren's name. Just once, and that's all she needed. The worst part? Goldie didn't say a word. She didn't confront him. She didn't go to the press. She didn't even tell her team to fight harder. She just swallowed it. Because back then, going up against someone like Warren Beatty was career threat. People adored him. Studios depended on him. Actors owed him favors. And if you publicly accused him of something, you'd be the one getting dragged. She said the whole thing played out over years, not months. Her career dipped, but it didn't crash. Scripts dried up, and big projects she should have been in suddenly went to other actresses. Her momentum slowed, not enough for people to point fingers, but enough for her to feel it, enough for her to know something had shifted. Goldie's friends at the time noticed the pattern too. but nobody could say anything out loud. This was still the era where powerful men ran the industry like private kingdoms. And when a man like Warren pulled support, you didn't complain. You just worked twice as hard to make up the difference. She said it wasn't until years later, decades even, that she felt comfortable telling the truth. Not to start drama or to even drag him, but to show how normal this kind of behavior was back then. A woman says no, and suddenly her opportunities mysteriously disappear. What makes the whole thing even darker is that Warren didn't do anything illegal. He didn't threaten her. He didn't assault her. He didn't scream at her. He just removed his approval. And in that era, losing the approval of a man with that much power was enough to derail your entire trajectory. Goldie said that looking back, it was one of the clearest reminders of how Hollywood really worked behind the scenes. Not always with scandals and shouting, but with quiet decisions made in private rooms. One man whispers a doubt about you, and suddenly you're difficult, or not bankable, or not the right fit. And because everyone respected Warren, nobody questioned him. She said the saddest part is that she genuinely admired him as an actor. She thought he was brilliant, complicated, and magnetic. But the moment she rejected him, she became another woman he needed to handle. And in his world, handling someone didn't require a fight. It just required being powerful enough that no one would challenge you when you shut a door. By the time Goldie finally talked about it publicly, she wasn't angry, just tired. Tired of pretending those years were just bad timing. Tired of the myth of the golden era being this glamorous, harmless place. And tired of the idea that staying quiet was the polite thing to do. And just when you think Goldie's done dealing with men who mistake power for personality, Hollywood hits her with a whole different flavor of chaos. Because while Warren tried to sabotage her from the shadows, the next guy on her list brought the attitude right to her face. On set, in real time, and with zero shame. But what happens when your co-star can't stand that you might actually be better at something? Enter Chevy Chase. Chevy Chase, the co-star who couldn't stand sharing the spotlight. If you ever wondered what happens when a rising comedian meets a woman who's naturally funnier than him, Chevy Chase answered that question on the set of Foul Play, loudly. Goldie walked into that movie bright, bubbly, and ready to work. Chevy walked in like he was doing the world a favor just by showing up. And the minute the cameras rolled, his ego started screaming for help. Crew members have said he was arrogant from day one, constantly mocking her mid-scene, throwing out random jokes that weren't in the script, and derailing take after take because he couldn't handle her getting the bigger laughs. And the second she landed a moment that stole the scene, he'd sulk like he got benched from his own movie. Around this time, Goldie was also balancing life as a mom. Her son Oliver Hudson and daughter Kate Hudson were still young, but already showing the Hollywood spark that would later make them stars in their own right. Both Oliver and Kate would go on to become Hollywood stars themselves. Oliver with roles in shows like Rules of Engagement and Nashville, and Kate earning an Oscar nom for Almost Famous and becoming a household name in her own right. While she adored them, the stress of juggling motherhood with a chaotic set only added to the pressure. Goldie had to compartmentalize, protect her energy on set while keeping her family life grounded, making sure she could give her kids the love and attention they needed, even on long, tense days. Their chemistry on screen looked sweet and effortless, but behind the camera, it was a whole different vibe. Icy, awkward, and filled with those quiet, tense moments where everyone pretends they don't hear the shade being thrown. By the end of filming, they were permanently done with each other. No big blow-up, no dramatic showdown, just two people who knew they'd never work together again, and Chevy made sure of it long before anyone yelled, "Cut!" The real test of her patience walked in wearing a smirk and a reputation for being, dare I say, difficult. Bill Murray, the table read from hell. So picture this. Goldie shows up to a table read, bright, prepared, and ready to work. This is late 70s, early 80s Goldie, the era when she could charm a room before she even sat down. And who strolls in late like he owns the studio? Bill Murray. Not apologetic, not subtle, just breezing in with that "I'll get to it when I get to it" energy. Goldie says the man didn't just walk in late, he walked in loud, cracking jokes, interrupting people, throwing the whole room off rhythm, like he was performing for some invisible audience only he could hear. Everyone else is trying to be professional, and Bill is basically treating the table read like open mic night. But the real mess didn't start until he turned his attention to her. Goldie starts reading her lines, doing what she does best, and Murray cuts in, not with notes, not with direction, but with full-on mockery. He mimicked her delivery, exaggerated her expressions, acted like she was giving some kind of cheap sitcom performance. Goldie said it didn't even feel playful. It felt mean. Mean and very, very intentional. Imagine being one of the biggest stars of your era, a legit Oscar winner, and some man who just rolled in late thinks he's going to embarrass you for sport. Goldie didn't raise her voice. She didn't argue. She didn't give him the satisfaction. She simply closed her script, got up, and walked out of the room and out of the project entirely. And here's the kicker. She never worked with Bill Murray again. Not once. Not a cameo, not a reunion, not a time heals everything moment. Because, for Goldie, there's a difference between quirky and cruel. And whatever that day was, it wasn't quirky. The wild part? This story lines right up with the dozens of other tales about Murray being disruptive, unpredictable, and sometimes just plain nasty on set. But Goldie's experience stands out because she wasn't some newcomer trying to fight for credibility. She was already a major star, and even she wasn't spared the nonsense. So yes, Warren may have run the slow sabotage campaign, but Bill went for the quick hit. The next guy didn't wait for a set, a shoot, or even a script meeting to act up. He went for the disrespect right in the audition room. What do you do when the humiliation comes before the cameras even roll? Dustin Hoffman, the audition that turned into an ambush. By the time Goldie crossed paths with Dustin Hoffman, she already knew Hollywood was full of characters who loved their own reflection a little too much. But nothing quite prepared her for the circus act he pulled during what was supposed to be a simple audition. The incident took place during an audition for a high-profile project in the early 1980s. Goldie arrived prepared, polished, ready to bring her signature charm and timing. She wasn't just a pretty face, she was an Oscar winner. This was no goofball gig, it was prestige. Hoffman, already a celebrated actor for Kramer vs. Kramer and Tootsie, had a reputation for intensity. Goldie starts delivering her lines, and at first, he's quiet. But not neutral quiet. That performative quiet people use when they're just waiting to pounce. And oh, he pounced. Right in front of the director, producers, assistants, basically anyone with ears. Hoffman stops her mid-scene and says her acting feels too sitcom, not in a helpful, gentle, let's adjust the tone kind of way. More like a public critique designed to embarrass her, as if the point wasn't the performance, but the power trip. He was essentially mocking the style that had made her so beloved and bankable. Goldie said it felt less like feedback and more like a slap disguised as guidance. Here she was, An Oscar winner, a woman with receipts, and this man was talking to her like she was reading for a toothpaste commercial. She didn't argue. She didn't defend herself. She just did what she always does when a line is crossed. She removed herself. Goldie closed the door on the audition, closed the door on the project, and closed the door on ever working with Dustin Hoffman again. And here's the twist. This audition was supposed to be a big opportunity, one of those prestige pieces that actors love to brag about. But Goldie wasn't about to endure disrespect just to chase a role. She had already survived Warren's backstage sabotage and Bill Murray's comedy at your expense routine. She wasn't collecting any more emotional bruises to satisfy Dustin Hoffman's ego. Hollywood loved to paint her as the bubbly blonde, the giggly sweetheart. But moments like this showed exactly why she lasted. When the room turned toxic, Goldie didn't play along. She left, and she never looked back. And if surviving the likes of Warren, Murray, Chevy, and Dustin taught her anything, what happens when old-school Hollywood royalty thinks he's still running the show? Kirk Douglas, when old Hollywood ego meets a microphone. Kirk Douglas is one of those names people whisper with reverence, like saying it too loud might summon a black-and-white movie marathon. He was Spartacus, Hollywood royalty. He was the blueprint for every square-jawed leading man that came after him. And Goldie knew all that. She respected the legacy, she respected the work, but respecting the resume does not mean she had to respect the behavior, especially after what happened on a panel in the late 90s. According to Goldie, the event was supposed to be this classy, harmless industry discussion, actors talking craft, history, and the whole state of cinema thing. Cute, simple, peaceful. But the moment Kirk sat down, it was like the universe whispered, "Good luck, girl." Goldie said she barely got her first sentence out before Kirk cut her off. Not once, not twice, but practically every time she opened her mouth. She'd start a point, and he'd bulldoze right over it like she was background noise at his own tribute ceremony. He'd interrupt mid-thought, mid-word, mid-breath, as if the audience was only there to hear him deliver a monologue on why he matters. And the best part? He did it with that classic, old-school, syrupy charm. The kind of tone where he pretended that he was being playful, but everyone in the room knew exactly what he was doing. Smiling, nodding, talking over her, then circling back to explain her own point like she was a kid describing a drawing. Goldie sat there thinking, "Sir, I am an Oscar winner, and you're acting like I wandered in from the catering table." Every time she tried adding something insightful or even just finishing a sentence, Kirk would swoop in, reroute the conversation, and dismiss her contribution like she was just there for decoration. That was the part that really stung, how effortless the disrespect was. It wasn't aggressive, it wasn't loud, it was just practiced. Like he'd been doing it to women for decades and never once been checked on it. The audience felt it too. You know when a room gets awkward but nobody wants to admit it? People shifting in their seats, fake laughing, pretending this wasn't a masterclass in casual sexism delivered live on stage. Goldie kept her composure because she's Goldie, but she said inside she was boiling. Not because he disagreed with her, but because he didn't even let her exist in the conversation. It wasn't a scandal at the time. Nobody wrote headlines or pulled him aside. But for Goldie, it was a moment that summed up exactly what Hollywood felt like for women of her generation. You could be talented, successful, beloved by audiences, and an older male legend could still treat you like an afterthought the moment the spotlight hit the stage. And the saddest part is, she wasn't surprised. Not really. Because back then, this was normal. Men talked, women smiled, men interrupted, and women let them. Men took ownership of every room they walked into, and women learned not to make a scene. Goldie never worked with Kirk Douglas, never feuded with him, never had some dramatic showdown. But that panel, that was enough. That was the moment she realized that even in the twilight of his career, Kirk Douglas still embodied the exact kind of golden age sexism she was finally brave enough to call out. It wasn't evil in the cartoonish sense. No screaming, no sabotage, just the kind of condescending dismissal that hits harder the older and more experienced you get. And that's why he made her list. And if Kirk Douglas steamrolling her on that panel made you think the old Hollywood boys' club was finally fading out with age, hold that thought. Because the next man on Goldie's list proved that arrogance doesn't retire. It just gets louder. What happens when a legendary actor dismisses your passion in front of an audience, turns your serious message into a punchline, and somehow makes it all about himself? Sean Penn, The Charity Gala Burn. By 2014, Goldie Hawn had been in Hollywood long enough to know when someone was trying to throw shade. But Sean Penn? He found a way to make it sting in public, with cameras rolling and an audience watching. It all went down at a charity gala. Goldie was there to speak on mental health, something she's deeply passionate about and has championed for years. She had prepared her message, her points, her energy, and the sincerity that comes from genuinely caring. Enter Sean Penn. Goldie recalls that the moment she started speaking, he cut her down, loud enough for everyone to hear, sarcastic enough to leave no doubt. He dismissed her message, sneered at the subject matter, and capped it all off by calling her a celebrity giggler. That's right, the same woman who could command a stage, a screen, or a room, reduced in his eyes to a laughing, lightweight celebrity. Goldie said the insult hit harder than any on-set antics or audition nightmare. This was public, it was deliberate, and it came from someone she hadn't done anything to provoke. No past disputes, no crossed paths, no previous tension, just Penn, apparently needing to remind everyone that he could dominate the room. The aftermath? Goldie didn't confront him or try to win a verbal battle, and she sure didn't respond in public. She simply avoided him after that. Events where he might show up? She skipped them. Invitations that could have been networking gold? Politely declined. Because some burns are too personal, and Penn made it clear in one public moment that he didn't respect her voice or her experience. Goldie didn't put him on blast for drama's sake. She shared it years later to show that even decades into her career, men could still try to diminish her in front of an audience, under the guise of charm or wit. And while Warren Beatty's sabotage was slow and subtle, Chevy's was on-set ego, and Murray's was chaotic humor. Penn's was a cold, public dismissal. One that left a sting lasting long after the cameras stopped rolling. Goldie Hawn didn't just name names, she gave us a roadmap of Hollywood toxicity. There's the slow burn sabotage, like Warren Beatty quietly freezing her projects. There's the ego on-set chaos, Chevy Chase style. Then there's the mocking, humiliating quick-hit cruelty of Bill Murray, and the public power plays of Sean Penn. And let's not forget the dismissive old-school sexism of Kirk Douglas, or the abrasive perfectionism of Dustin Hoffman. And the crazy part? None of it involved breaking the law. None of it was obvious to the casual observer. These were subtle, insidious moves that chipped away at someone's career, confidence, or sanity without ever showing up in the tabloids. Goldie Hawn had to navigate it all, gracefully, because one misstep could have derailed her completely. That takes a mix of talent, charm, and steel nerves most people don't even know they have. Hearing it all laid out like this, it's impossible not to rethink those legendary reputations. These men were brilliant, sure, But brilliance doesn't erase cruelty. It doesn't excuse the way women had to navigate a minefield just to do their jobs. And Goldie? She survived. She thrived. She built a career, raised 2 Hollywood stars, which is exactly why her voice matters now. She created a grounded family with Kate and Oliver, showing that a career in Hollywood doesn't have to come at the expense of motherhood. Her kids, both now successful actors, carry her legacy while proving that resilience, and maybe a little sparkle, is hereditary. Goldie's experiences also remind us that Hollywood legend isn't always synonymous with good human being. These men were brilliant, charismatic, and influential, but brilliance didn't excuse arrogance, cruelty, or disrespect. And Goldie calling them out decades later? That's important. It's a lesson in speaking up, even when the odds are stacked against you, and recognizing that surviving in Hollywood doesn't always mean staying silent. It also makes you wonder, if someone like Goldie were starting out today, would she face the same obstacles? Maybe the system has evolved slightly. Less overt silencing, more accountability, more women in power. Or has Hollywood changed just enough that the methods are shinier, sneakier, but no less effective? Maybe the big egos now tweet their shade instead of sulking on set. Or maybe they've just learned to package their cruelty with award shows and charity events. Either way, what Goldie shows us is timeless. Talent and integrity can survive even the most chaotic, ego-driven environments. She didn't lash out publicly, she didn't stoop to pettiness, but she also didn't stay quiet forever. That's the lesson here, knowing when to push back, when to protect yourself, and when to just walk away. And maybe, just maybe, that's how the legends of tomorrow will navigate Hollywood's golden chaos. Hollywood loves to sell fairy tales, but Goldie Hawn just reminded us the castle's got a few skeletons. Power trips, quiet sabotage, public burns. She's seen it all. Makes you wonder, are today's legends really any different, or just better at smiling for the camera? Hollywood may glitter, but remember, sometimes the dirt is hiding right beneath the sparkle. Who else's shine do you want unmasked next? Let's hear it in the comments section, and remember to subscribe so you don't miss that video when it drops.